I am Madeline, 32 years old, and until today a dedicated senior marketing executive at Premier Advertising. 5 years of my life spent climbing from assistant to my current position, pouring my heart into every campaign. My boss, Richard, had been growing more hostile by the week, but nothing prepared me for what happened after the Maxwell presentation. The sting of his hand across my face still burns as he stands before me, red-faced and shouting, "Hand over your keycard," while the entire office watches in shocked silence. If you've ever experienced workplace abuse, drop where you're watching from in the comments and hit subscribe to join others who've overcome similar situations. My journey to Premier Advertising began with a marketing degree from NYU. I graduated with honors, brimming with ideas and strategies I couldn't wait to implement in the real world. Marketing wasn't just a career choice for me. It was a passion that drove me to excel. I loved the psychology behind campaigns, understanding what motivates consumers and creating messages that resonated on a deeper level. When I landed the assistant position at Premier 5 years ago, I thought I had hit the jackpot. The company had a growing reputation in the industry, working with mid-sized businesses looking to expand their market reach. I remember calling my parents in Ohio, excitement bubbling through my voice as I told them about my new job in New York City. They were proud but concerned about the big city swallowing their small-town daughter. "Just be careful, Madeline," my mother had said. "Those corporate places can work you to death." She wasn't wrong. From day one, I poured everything into my role. While other assistants clocked out at 5, I stayed until 7 or 8, learning everything I could about the industry. Weekends became optional as I volunteered for additional projects. My social life dwindled to occasional texts with friends I rarely saw anymore. But the sacrifice seemed worth it when I moved up to junior marketing associate after just 18 months. 2 years later, I earned my senior position, becoming the youngest executive on the team. My apartment in the city, a tiny one-bedroom that cost nearly half my monthly salary, became little more than a place to sleep between workdays. Richard Bernard became the marketing director 3 years ago. At 49, he had an impressive resume, and initially I was excited to learn from someone with his experience. He came from larger agencies and brought big ideas and promises of expansion. The board loved him immediately. The first signs of trouble were subtle. He would present my research to clients without acknowledgement. When campaigns succeeded, he claimed credit. When they faltered, he found scapegoats among the team. But his results kept the board happy, so his methods went unchallenged. Alicia, my closest friend at work, noticed the patterns before I admitted them to myself. "Richard is toxic, Madeline," she told me over lunch 6 months ago. "The way he pits people against each other, takes credit for your work, criticizes you in public but never praises you. Classic narcissistic boss." I defended him then. "He's under pressure from the board. Besides, he approved my promotion." Alicia just shook her head. "Just be careful. I've seen his type before." Thomas, our HR manager, was no help either. A company man through and through, he viewed his job as protecting executives and the company image, not supporting employees. Every complaint mysteriously became a communication issue that required the employee to adjust their expectations or working style. The atmosphere at Premier grew increasingly tense under Richard's leadership. What had once been a collaborative environment became competitive and fearful. People stopped sharing ideas in meetings, afraid Richard would dismiss them publicly, or worse, steal them and claim them as his own later. Despite this, my portfolio at Premier grew impressive. I brought in the Hartman account, a mid-sized furniture retailer whose online sales increased 40% after our campaign launched. The Davidson Financial rebrand I led won an industry award. My work helped small businesses grow and established brands refresh their image for new markets. About 3 months ago, Richard hired Jessica, a 26-year-old with less experience than most of our team. Almost immediately, she became his new favorite. She was invited to meetings I would normally attend. When I offered ideas, Richard dismissed them, only to praise identical suggestions from Jessica minutes later. I tried not to take it personally. Perhaps she had skills I didn't recognize yet. I even offered to help her learn our systems and introduced her to our major clients. The Maxwell Enterprises opportunity came 2 months ago. A nationwide retail chain with hundreds of locations, they represented the biggest potential client in Premier's history. Landing their business would mean expansion bonuses and security for everyone. Richard assigned the presentation to me, which I took as a sign of trust, despite our difficult relationship. "Don't mess this up," Madeline was all he said. For weeks, I researched Maxwell's market position, their competitors, and their customers. I built comprehensive strategies for both traditional and digital campaigns. I practiced my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep. The night before, I stayed until midnight, perfecting every slide, every transition, every data point. That morning, I arrived 2 hours early to prepare the conference room. I checked the projector, arranged water and coffee service, and reviewed my notes one final time. I felt confident and prepared. This was my opportunity to prove my value not just to Richard but to the entire company. When Richard walked in 30 minutes before the clients were due, he barely acknowledged me. He set his laptop down and connected it to the projector. "I made some changes to the presentation," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Just follow my lead." Before I could review his changes, the receptionist called. The Maxwell team had arrived early. As we walked to greet them, Richard whispered, "Let me do most of the talking. Just cover the market research when I signal you." My heart sank. This wasn't going to be my presentation after all. But I smiled professionally as we greeted the Maxwell executives and escorted them to the conference room. I had worked too hard to let politics ruin this opportunity for the company. Little did I know that this presentation would change everything, leading to a confrontation that would leave my career and my dignity hanging in the balance. The Maxwell Enterprises executives filed into our conference room, 4 men and 2 women, in crisp business attire that screamed success and confidence. I had researched each of them thoroughly and greeted them by name, which earned appreciative smiles. Richard stood back, allowing me this small moment, before he stepped forward to direct everyone to their seats. "We're excited to show you what Premier Advertising can do for Maxwell Enterprises," Richard began, his voice carrying that practiced charisma that had charmed our board. "Madeline has prepared some research for us, but first, let me share our vision." I sat quietly as Richard launched into a broad overview that we hadn't discussed. Some of his points contradicted the strategy I had developed based on the market research. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside, confusion and anxiety were building. This wasn't the approach we had agreed upon. When Richard finally turned the floor over to me for the market research portion, I recovered quickly and delivered my segment with enthusiasm and expertise. I was just beginning to outline the customer demographic analysis when Richard interrupted. "Let's not get bogged down in numbers," he said with a dismissive wave. "The big picture is what matters here." Sarah Jennings, Maxwell's marketing director, furrowed her brow. "Actually, I'm quite interested in the demographic breakdown. Our previous campaigns struggled with targeting the right customer segments." Richard smiled tightly. "Of course. Madeline, just give them the highlights. We have a lot to cover." I continued, but now I felt rushed and undermined. I condensed 15 slides of critical data into a 3-minute overview. When I reached the slide showing customer conversion rates, I noticed it had been altered. My original data showed areas where Maxwell's current strategy was underperforming paired with our solutions. The new slide showed only the positive metrics. "There seems to be some data missing here," noted Mark Thompson, Maxwell's chief operating officer. I was particularly interested in seeing the analysis of our Western region performance. Before I could explain, Richard jumped in. "We found that data to be anomalous due to market variations. We didn't want to base recommendations on outliers." This was news to me. The Western region data was perfectly valid and showed important patterns that our strategy addressed. I felt my credibility eroding with every minute. When we reached the social media strategy section, a key slide was completely missing, the one that showcased our most innovative approach. Richard smoothly continued, as if it had never existed. I scrambled to verbally cover the missing information, but without the visuals, my explanation felt incomplete. "I think what Madeline is trying to say," Richard interjected, "is that we'll develop a social strategy after we establish the traditional media foundation." But that wasn't what I was trying to say at all. Our proposal's strength was its integrated approach, with social and traditional channels working in tandem from day one. By the end of the presentation, the Maxwell team looked confused and underwhelmed. What should have been a dynamic, comprehensive pitch had become disjointed and vague. When Sarah asked about budget allocation across channels, Richard gave an answer that contradicted the detailed breakdown I had prepared. After the Maxwell team left with lukewarm handshakes and non-committal thanks, Richard turned to me, his face hard. "Well, that could have gone better," he said, as if the failure had nothing to do with his interference. "Richard, you changed half the presentation without telling me. The missing Western region data, the altered slides, the missing social strategy section. They noticed those gaps. Are you saying this is my fault?" His voice dropped dangerously. "I'm saying we weren't on the same page. If you had concerns about my approach, we should have discussed them before the meeting. Your approach was too detail-oriented and missed the big picture. Next time, clear your entire presentation with me beforehand, slide by slide." He gathered his things and left without another word. I stood alone in the conference room, the failure heavy on my shoulders, despite knowing I wasn't entirely to blame. When I returned to my desk, I found an email from Thomas, in HR, requesting a meeting tomorrow morning. No explanation, just a mandatory calendar invite. Alicia stopped by my desk later that afternoon. "How did the Maxwell pitch go?" she asked. But her expression told me she already knew. "Richard sabotaged it," I said quietly, making sure no one else could hear. "Changed slides, removed key data, contradicted our strategy." Not surprising, Alicia sighed. "Have you heard the rumors about restructuring? Upper management is looking to streamline departments. Some people think Richard is positioning himself by pushing others out. That's ridiculous. We need every person on this team." "Not according to Richard. Word is," he told the board, "the marketing department has redundancies." My stomach nodded. "Is that why Thomas wants to meet with me tomorrow?" "Could be. Or it could be about Jessica having lunch with the Maxwell team right now." What I looked up to see Jessica's empty desk. They came back. Why wasn't I informed? Alicia gave me a sympathetic look. Richard took her. Executive lunch, he called it. To salvage what they could from the presentation. That evening, I stayed late reviewing the shared drive to see what other changes Richard had made without my knowledge. I found multiple files had been modified the night before the presentation. The timestamps showed edits at 11:30 p.m. after I had finally gone home. The email from Thomas sat in my inbox like a ticking bomb. The subject line simply read, "Meeting request, important discussion." That night I barely slept. Questions raced through my mind. Was I being set up to take the fall for losing Maxwell? Was the restructuring rumor true? Why was Richard undermining me after years of solid work? I got up early and spent extra time on my appearance, a form of armor for whatever awaited me. The woman in the mirror looked confident, even if I didn't feel it. 5 years of dedication to Premier. Countless successful campaigns, nights and weekends sacrificed. It had to count for something, didn't it? As I headed to the office, I reminded myself of my accomplishments. The Hartman campaign, the Davidson Award, the client retention rate that improved 15% under my strategies. Whatever happened in that meeting with Thomas, I would face it with professionalism and dignity. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a systematic campaign to push me out. One that would test not just my career resilience but my very sense of self-worth. The meeting with Thomas went exactly as I feared. Seated in his sterile office, with its motivational posters about teamwork and persistence, I listened as he explained that concerns had been raised about my communication style and ability to collaborate with leadership. "Richard feels that you're resistant to direction," Thomas said, not meeting my eyes as he reviewed a file. The Maxwell presentation was apparently quite problematic. "I prepared extensively for that presentation, Thomas. Richard made last-minute changes without informing me and removed critical data that the clients specifically asked about." Thomas sighed as if I was missing the point. "Madeline, Richard is the marketing director. It's his prerogative to make executive decisions about client presentations. Your role is to support those decisions, even when those decisions undermine our chances of landing the client." "That's a subjective assessment," he replied coldly. "This meeting isn't about debating strategy. It's about adjusting your approach to align with management expectations." I left with a verbal coaching notice in my file, the first negative mark in my 5-year history with the company. Over the next week, Richard's behavior grew increasingly hostile. I was removed from 3 email threads discussing ongoing projects that I had been leading. When I inquired about the omission, Richard claimed it was an administrative oversight, yet it happened again the next day. During the team meeting on Wednesday, Richard assigned Jessica to lead the Hartman account, refresh a client I had brought in and worked with for 2 years. But I've been developing the refresh strategy for months, I objected. I have relationships with their team and understand their market challenges. Fresh eyes will bring fresh ideas, Richard replied dismissively. Besides, you seem overwhelmed with your current workload. My workload had actually diminished as projects were quietly reassigned. After the meeting, Alicia pulled me aside. This is classic, constructive dismissal, she whispered. They're setting you up to either quit in frustration or fail, so they can fire you with cause. You need to document everything. I took her advice seriously. I began keeping detailed notes of every interaction, every email, every project change. I saved emails to a personal account, including those showing my successful track record. I compiled client testimonials that praised my work specifically. On Thursday afternoon, I passed the glass-walled conference room and overheard Richard speaking to 2 board members. The Maxwell situation was unfortunate, he was saying. Madeline insisted on including technical data that confused rather than impressed. I tried to guide her, but he trailed off with a significant headshake. My face burned with indignation. It was a complete inversion of what had actually happened. The following Monday, Richard held a department critique session. When my current project came up for review, his criticism was relentless. The concept lacks innovation, he declared. The copy is generic. The visual direction feels dated. This needs a complete overhaul before it goes anywhere near the client. The same concept had received his initial approval 2 weeks earlier. The team sat in uncomfortable silence, no one meeting my eyes. Only Alicia gave me a small sympathetic glance. That afternoon, I emailed Richard requesting a private meeting to discuss my projects and recent feedback. His assistant replied that his schedule was full for the next 2 weeks but would try to find time soon. The stress began taking a physical toll. I developed insomnia, lying awake, replaying confrontations and imagining worse ones to come. My appetite diminished. I started getting tension headaches that no amount of painkillers seemed to touch. One morning I arrived to find my desk had been rearranged. My personal items were neatly boxed and my computer had been moved to face the wall instead of the open office. When I asked the office manager about it, she said Richard had ordered the change to improve department layout efficiency. Later that week, I discovered that files related to the Hartman account were missing from my computer. When I mentioned this to IT, they said a directory cleanup had been authorized by Richard and the files had been moved to Jessica's access folder. Then came an unexpected email from Sarah Jennings at Maxwell Enterprises sent directly to me. Madeline, I've been reviewing your original proposal that you shared during our initial discovery call. Several key elements discussed there were missing from the formal presentation. I'm particularly interested in the Western region strategy and social media integration you initially outlined. Could you clarify if these are still part of Premier's proposed approach? I stared at the email, equal parts vindicated and terrified. Sarah had recognized the discrepancy between my original approach and the watered-down version Richard had presented, but responding directly might be seen as circumventing the chain of command. After careful consideration, I crafted a professional response, explaining that the presentation had been modified and that I would consult with Richard about providing the complete strategy details. I forwarded both emails to Richard with a note suggesting this was an opportunity to share the complete strategy and potentially recover the account. His response came minutes later. See me in my office. Now. Richard's face was flushed with anger when I entered. What the hell do you think you're doing communicating directly with Maxwell after that disaster of a presentation? I didn't initiate the contact, I explained calmly. Sarah reached out to me specifically about elements from the original strategy. You must have given her materials before the presentation. That was unauthorized. I shared a general overview during the discovery phase, which is standard procedure. They specifically missed elements that you removed from the final presentation. Richard's finger jabbed toward me. You've jeopardized any chance we had of salvaging this relationship. Fix this, or there will be serious consequences. How would you like me to fix it? I asked, maintaining my composure. Tell them whatever you need to. Say we're revising our approach. But do not contradict what was presented in that meeting, understood? I want to see your response before you send it. That weekend, I spent hours rebuilding the Maxwell strategy, carefully integrating the elements Richard had removed while maintaining consistency with what had been presented. I created detailed explanations that could satisfy Sarah's questions without throwing Richard under the bus, despite how tempting that was. Monday morning, I walked into the office with my completed work and a renewed determination to navigate this difficult situation professionally. I still believed in my abilities and the value I brought to Premier. I would not be pushed out without a fight. As I approached Richard's office to show him the Maxwell materials, I had no idea that within minutes everything would change in a way I could never have anticipated in full view of the entire office. I spotted Richard in the main conference room, the one with glass walls visible to the entire office floor. He was alone reviewing documents with a scowl on his face. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the glass door before entering with my revised Maxwell strategy in hand. I've completed the Maxwell materials you requested, I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. Richard looked up, his expression darkening when he saw me. Close the door. I did as instructed, acutely aware that we were visible to everyone but not audible. The glass fishbowl effect meant our interaction would have an audience, but at least the conversation would remain private. I see you've decided to waste more time on a lost cause, Richard said, not even glancing at the folder I placed on the table. Sarah Jennings specifically asked for this information. I believe we can still win their business if we address their concerns comprehensively. I opened the folder, turning it toward him. I've integrated the original strategy elements while maintaining consistency with the presentation. Richard shoved the folder aside. I received a call from Mark Thompson this morning. Apparently, Sarah showed him some email exchanges with you from before the presentation. Emails where you promised approaches that I never approved. My stomach tightened, but I remained composed. All preliminary discussions were based on standard Premier strategies and the research you signed off on. Nothing was promised that we couldn't deliver. You went behind my back. Richard's voice rose sharply. You've been undermining me from the start, trying to make me look bad to steal my clients. Colleagues outside were beginning to notice the confrontation. I saw Alicia stand up at her desk, watching with concern. That's not true, Richard. I've only ever tried to serve our clients' best interests and support Premier's goals. Every strategy I developed was submitted for your approval. You think I don't see what you're doing? First, the presentation sabotage. Now, these direct communications. He stood up, towering over me. You've been gunning for my position since I arrived. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. I've never expressed any interest in your job. I've been focused on my own responsibilities and helping this team succeed. Don't lie to me. Richard stepped closer, his face reddening. Thomas told me about your complaints. You've been trying to build a case against me for months. Now several people were openly watching. Jessica had stopped typing and was staring wide-eyed at the unfolding scene. Thomas emerged from his office, hovering uncertainly by the department entrance. I've only reported legitimate concerns about project management and communication issues, I replied, refusing to back down but keeping my voice level. Everything I've said is documented and factual. Factual, Richard spat the word. You wouldn't know a fact if it slapped you in the face. What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to process it. Richard stepped forward, his right hand swinging upward and connecting with my left cheek with enough force to snap my head to the side. The slap echoed in the small room, the sting spreading across my face like fire. Complete silence fell over the entire office. Through the glass walls I could see mouths hanging open, people frozen in shock. My own shock rendered me momentarily immobile, my hand rising slowly to my burning cheek. Richard's rage hadn't subsided with the physical outburst. If anything, crossing that line seemed to remove his last shred of professional restraint. His face contorted with anger as he thrust his hand toward me, palm up. Hand over your keycard. He spat, flecks of saliva flying from his mouth. You're done here. Get your things and get out. I felt the hot rush of tears threatening to spill, not from sadness but from pure shock and humiliation. My entire body trembled, but something inside me hardened simultaneously. This man had just assaulted me in front of dozens of witnesses. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. In that moment, I had a choice: surrender to his demand, pack my things and leave with my tail between my legs, or stand my ground and force him to face the consequences of his actions. 5 years of dedication flashed through my mind, along with every slight, every stolen idea, every public criticism. Number. The word came out quiet but firm. Richard blinked clearly, not expecting resistance after his display of dominance. What did you say? I said no. My voice strengthened. I will not hand over my key card. What you just did is workplace assault, and everyone saw it. Richard's eyes darted to the glass walls, suddenly registering the audience that had witnessed his loss of control. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. You're fired, he hissed, lowering his voice. I'll call security to escort you out. Go ahead, I replied, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. I'm sure they'll be interested to know why you're firing a senior executive immediately after physically assaulting her. Richard took a step back, his brain clearly recalculating. Everyone back to work, he shouted through the glass at the stunned onlookers. This is a private personnel matter. No one moved. In fact, Alicia had taken out her phone and appeared to be recording. Other employees were whispering to each other, pointing, some reaching for their own phones. You've lost your mind, Richard said to me, his voice low and threatening. No one will believe you over me. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. The door to the conference room opened and Alicia stepped in. I believe her, she said firmly. And I have about 30 seconds of video showing you hitting Madeline. Richard's face went from red to ashen. Give me that phone. That's company property. Actually, it's my personal phone, Alicia replied. And I'm not the only one who captured what happened. Another colleague, Brian from the design team, appeared at the door. I saw everything. You can't just hit people, Richard. That's assault. More employees began to gather. Some I'd worked closely with, others I barely knew, but they were all there, silent witnesses, finally finding their voices. Richard retreated toward the other door of the conference room. This is ridiculous. She's been sabotaging projects and undermining my authority for months. Thomas, tell them. Thomas had finally made his way to the growing crowd. His eyes darted between Richard, me, and the assembled employees, clearly assessing which way the wind was blowing. I think we all need to calm down, he began diplomatically. Madeline, perhaps you should take the rest of the day off while we sort this out. My cheek still stinging, I turned to face him. No, Thomas. I will not leave this office under a cloud. Richard just physically assaulted me in front of the entire department. This isn't a communication issue or a difference in management styles. It's workplace violence, and it's illegal. Security arrived, then 2 uniformed men looking confused about the situation. Richard immediately approached them. This employee is being terminated and needs to be escorted from the building, he said with forced authority. I stood my ground. Before you do anything, I addressed the security guards directly. You should know that this man just slapped me across the face in full view of the office. There are numerous witnesses and video evidence. I will be filing a police report for assault, and I advise you not to touch me unless you want to be named in the lawsuit that will certainly follow. The security guards exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared for this situation. Thomas stepped forward again. Let's all take a step back. Richard, I think you should return to your office while I handle this situation. Security, thank you for your prompt response, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. No one needs to be escorted out at this time. Richard looked from Thomas to the security guards to the crowd of employees, realization dawning that this situation had spiraled beyond his control. Without another word, he stormed out, slamming his office door behind him. In the aftermath of his departure, the conference room fell silent again. My legs suddenly felt weak, and I sank into a chair, the adrenaline that had kept me standing beginning to ebb. Thomas cleared his throat. Madeline, let's continue this discussion in my office. I looked up at him, then at my colleagues, who had stood up for me, then back to Thomas. I'm happy to meet with you, Thomas, but I want to be clear. Either this incident is properly investigated with appropriate consequences for Richard, or my next calls will be to the police. and an employment attorney. This isn't going away. As I gathered my composure to follow Thomas to his office, Alicia squeezed my shoulder in silent support. For the first time in months, despite the chaos and the throbbing in my cheek, I felt a strange sense of power returning. I had stood up to a bully and I wasn't standing alone. The office buzzed with whispered conversations as I walked to my desk. Shock had given way to controlled anger, and my hands moved with methodical precision as I documented everything while it was still fresh in my mind. I opened a new document and typed out every detail of the confrontation, including the exact words exchanged, Richard's physical action, and the names of everyone who had witnessed it. My phone pinged with a message from Alicia. "I sent you the video. Also, 5 other people recorded it. We've got your back." As I was saving the files, an email notification appeared from Thomas. "Please come to the conference room B immediately. Important discussion regarding this morning's incident." I backed up my documentation to my personal email before heading to the meeting. When I arrived, Thomas was seated with a woman I recognized as Patricia Lawson, the company's legal counsel. "Madeline, please have a seat." Thomas began, his tone artificially soothing. "This is Patricia from legal. We want to address what happened this morning directly and efficiently." Patricia smiled thinly. "First, let me say that Premier Advertising does not condone physical contact of any kind in the workplace. What happened was unfortunate and not representative of our company values." "It wasn't unfortunate," I corrected. "It was assault." Richard slapped me across the face in full view of the office for disagreeing with him. "Yes, well," Patricia continued, shuffling some papers, "we take this very seriously. We'd like to offer you a generous severance package in exchange for your discretion in this matter." I stared at them in disbelief. "You want to pay me to leave quietly after I was assaulted by my supervisor?" Thomas nodded eagerly. 4 months' salary, extended health benefits, and a neutral reference for future employment. All we ask is that you sign a standard non-disclosure agreement covering your employment at Premier." "And what happens to Richard?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Thomas and Patricia exchanged glances. "That's an internal personnel matter," Patricia replied. "But rest assured, appropriate action will be taken." So nothing, I translated. "He stays, I go, and everyone pretends this never happened." "We're offering a very generous package," Madeline, Thomas emphasized. "Most employees in your position would be grateful for such consideration." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, bringing up the video Alicia had sent me. I turned the screen toward them, showing Richard's hand connecting with my face in high definition. "This isn't just an internal personnel matter anymore. This is documented workplace violence. I have this video witness statements and 5 years of documented excellence, followed by 3 months of sudden criticism after I refused to let Richard take credit for my work." Patricia's professional veneer cracked slightly. "What exactly are you saying, Madeline?" "I'm saying I have evidence of assault, harassment, and what appears to be a coordinated effort to push me out after years of valuable service. I'm saying your severance offer isn't nearly enough to cover what's happened here." Thomas paled. "There's no need to make threats." "It's not a threat. It's me advocating for myself after being physically attacked at work." I stood up. "I need time to consider my options. In the meantime, I expect Richard to be removed from the workplace while you conduct a full investigation." Patricia nodded stiffly. "We'll need a day to consult with senior leadership about next steps." "You have until tomorrow morning," I replied, finding confidence in standing my ground. "After that, I'll be consulting with my own legal representation." When I returned to my desk, I found I had been logged out of my computer and my password no longer worked. My email access had been revoked as well. On my chair was an envelope containing a formal notice, placing me on administrative leave, with pay pending investigation of the incident. I was instructed not to return to the office until contacted by HR. As I packed up my personal items, messages flooded my phone from colleagues expressing support and outrage. Alicia helped me gather my things, whispering updates about what was happening in Richard's corner of the office. "He hasn't come out of his office. The board members are in there with him now. Everyone's talking about what happened." As I was leaving, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Sarah Jennings from Maxwell Enterprises. Madeline, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I wanted to follow up on our email exchange about the presentation discrepancies. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about my current situation. Actually, Sarah, I'm currently on administrative leave from Premier. There was an incident this morning. Oh, she sounded surprised. I'm sorry to hear that. If you don't mind my asking, does this have anything to do with the Maxwell presentation? Indirectly, yes. There were some disagreements about the strategy presented. Sarah was quiet for a moment. This confirms some concerns we've had about Premier's internal cohesion. Several elements of the presentation felt disjointed, and now I understand why. Would you be open to discussing your original strategy with us directly, not as a Premier representative but as a marketing professional? The request placed me in an ethical gray area. While I was on leave, not terminated, discussing Premier's clients could potentially violate confidentiality obligations. On the other hand, Sarah had already seen my original strategy outlines. I would need to consult with legal counsel before having that conversation, I replied carefully, but I appreciate your interest. After ending the call, I knew my next step needed to be finding an attorney. A quick search led me to Sarah Reynolds, an employment lawyer specializing in workplace harassment and discrimination cases. Her office agreed to see me that afternoon. Sarah's office was warm and inviting, nothing like the sterile corporate environment I'd become accustomed to. After reviewing the video, my documentation, and the administrative leave notice, she leaned back in her chair with a confident expression. Madeline, you have an extremely strong case here. Physical assault captured on video with multiple witnesses is just the tip of the iceberg. The pattern of behavior leading up to it, the retaliatory lockout from your computer, the attempt to buy your silence. This is textbook workplace harassment culminating in violence. What should I do next? I asked. First, don't sign anything Premier offers without having me review it. Second, we'll file formal complaints with both the State Employment Authority and the police for the assault. Third, we'll send a formal legal notice to Premier outlining the situation and our demands. What kind of demands? Sarah outlined a comprehensive approach: substantial compensation for the harassment, assault, and potential career damage, a formal apology, Richard's termination, and implementation of new harassment policies at Premier. Over the next few days, I threw myself into building my case. I researched Richard's employment history and discovered he had left 2 previous agencies under murky circumstances. Through industry contacts, I connected with 3 former employees who shared stories disturbingly similar to my own experience with Richard. Meanwhile, Premier's response escalated from conciliatory to aggressive. They offered an increased severance package, then suggested I had performance issues predating the incident, then implied I had somehow provoked Richard's reaction. Each communication revealed their growing desperation. The most difficult decision came when Premier's attorney proposed a substantial settlement with a strict confidentiality clause. Sarah laid out my options candidly. You can take the money, sign the NDA, and move on. It's a significant amount that would give you financial security while you find a new position. Or you can reject it and proceed with legal action, which would be public but potentially take years to resolve. I thought about all the people who had experienced similar treatment but lacked the video evidence or witness support I had. I thought about Richard potentially moving to another company to repeat the same behavior with new victims. I don't want this buried under an NDA, I decided. This isn't just about money. It's about accountability and preventing this from happening to someone else. Sarah nodded with approval. Then we proceed with formal complaints. Be prepared, though. This will get more difficult before it gets better. She wasn't wrong. Within days of filing complaints with the State Employment Authority, I began receiving messages from unknown numbers. Some expressing support from industry colleagues who had heard about the incident. Others containing thinly veiled warnings about being blacklisted in the industry. A contact at Premier informed me that Richard had been placed on leave pending investigation, but the company was actively working to discredit my claims. They were interviewing employees, searching for anyone willing to speak negatively about my performance or behavior. The pressure was intense, but with each attempt to intimidate me, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about my dignity, my future, and ensuring that workplace bullies faced consequences for their actions. 1 month after the slap that changed everything, I received notification that the State Employment Authority had found sufficient evidence to proceed with a formal investigation of Premier Advertising. The police had also filed misdemeanor assault charges against Richard personally. As difficult as the journey had been so far, I felt a growing sense of validation. The system, slow and imperfect as it was responding to the truth. For the first time since that fateful confrontation, I allowed myself to believe that justice might actually be possible. 3 months after Richard's hand connected with my face, I stood in my new apartment, smaller and farther from downtown than my previous place, but somehow more like home. The morning light filtered through curtains I had chosen myself, illuminating the space that had become my sanctuary during this period of unexpected transformation. Financial reality had hit hard once the regular paychecks stopped. While my case proceeded, I had to adjust to a tighter budget, but the trade-off was worth it. This space was mine, untainted by the stress and anxiety that had permeated my old apartment during the worst of the Premier nightmare. My phone chimed with an incoming email, the distinctive tone I had set for important messages. It was from Vivian Porter, creative director at Horizon Marketing, confirming our interview scheduled for that afternoon. After weeks of networking and sending my portfolio to carefully selected agencies, this opportunity felt promising. Horizon had a reputation for creative excellence and a healthy workplace culture, 2 factors that now topped my priority list in any potential employer. Unlike my desperate rush to find any position after college, I approached this job search with deliberate care. Each company was researched thoroughly with particular attention to leadership structure and employee reviews. I reached out to current and former employees through professional networks, asking pointed questions about management styles and handling of workplace conflicts. Several former clients had reached out after hearing about my departure from Premier. The Hartman team had been particularly supportive, with their marketing manager calling personally to express shock at my situation and offer to serve as a reference. These connections proved invaluable, as potential employers could hear directly about my work quality from those who had benefited from it. Perhaps the most unexpected source of support came from a workplace harassment survivors group that my attorney had recommended. Initially reluctant to attend, fearing it would feel like wallowing in victimhood, I discovered instead a community of resilient professionals who understood exactly what I was experiencing. They shared practical advice on rebuilding confidence, handling interview questions about employment gaps, and navigating the legal process. Weekly therapy sessions had also become an essential part of my recovery. Dr. Levine helped me process not just the trauma of the assault, but the months of gaslighting and undermining that preceded it. Through our sessions, I began to recognize how I had internalized Richard's criticism, doubting my own competence despite years of proven success. Workplace trauma can be particularly insidious, Dr. Levine had explained, because it attacks your professional identity, something many of us tie closely to our sense of self-worth. My family, initially shocked by what had happened, had finally stopped suggesting I should have just taken the settlement and moved on. My mother, who had visited for a week after learning about the assault, now called regularly with genuine interest in both my case and my healing process. "I never understood how these things happen until it happened to you," she admitted during her last call. "I always thought people should just report bad behavior, and it would be fixed. Now I see how the system protects the powerful." The most recent update from Alicia had confirmed what many at Premier had suspected: Richard had been quietly resigned from his position. The company had framed it as his personal decision to pursue other opportunities, but the timing, coming right after my legal team submitted additional witness statements, made the true reason obvious. "They've implemented new harassment training," Alicia reported, "and there's a whole new reporting system that bypasses direct managers. Too little too late if you ask me, but at least something's changing." Maxwell Enterprises had ultimately signed with a different agency, a boutique firm with a female leadership team. Sarah Jennings had reached out personally to let me know their decision, adding that my situation had influenced their choice to seek an agency with a demonstrated commitment to ethical workplace practices. My case had gained attention in industry publications, first as brief mentions of an alleged assault at Premier Advertising, then as more detailed explorations of toxic workplace culture in marketing agencies. One particularly in-depth article had featured anonymous accounts from others who had experienced similar treatment, suggesting my situation was far from unique. Last week, I had received an invitation to speak at a Women in Business conference about recognizing and responding to workplace harassment. The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. The idea of turning my painful experience into something that might help others felt like reclaiming power that had been taken from me. As my court date approached, the anxiety dreams returned. In them, I faced Richard across a conference table, but this time he grew larger while I shrank, my voice becoming too small to be heard. Dr. Levine helped me develop techniques for managing these intrusions, focusing on the reality of my current strength rather than the memory of past vulnerability. The most surprising development came yesterday when an email arrived from Drake & Associates, a highly respected agency known for their innovative campaigns and collaborative culture. They had heard about my situation through industry channels and were impressed by my portfolio and professional reputation. The email included an invitation to interview for a senior position with their team, emphasizing their zero-tolerance policy for harassment and commitment to maintaining a respectful workplace. As I prepared for the Horizon interview, selecting a professional outfit and reviewing my portfolio once more, I realized how much had changed in 3 months. The woman who had stood trembling in that glass conference room, face burning from an unexpected slap, was still part of me. But she had been joined by someone stronger, someone who understood her worth beyond any job title or company affiliation. The strange sense of freedom that came with standing up for myself had transformed other areas of my life as well. I spoke more directly in personal relationships, set clearer boundaries with friends and family, and pursued interests that work had previously consumed. The painful ending at Premiere had somehow created space for a more authentic beginning elsewhere. When my phone rang with Alicia's ringtone, I answered immediately, always eager for updates from my allies still at Premiere. "You won't believe who reached out to me on LinkedIn," she said without preamble. "Tell me." "Jessica. She wants to meet for coffee. Says she needs to talk about what happened and her role in it." I paused, surprised by my lack of anger at the mention of her name. Jessica had been Richard's willing accomplice in my marginalization. But she had also been new, impressionable, and clearly manipulated by him. "Are you going to meet her?" I asked. "I'm thinking about it." She seemed genuinely remorseful. "Apparently things got worse for everyone after you left. Richard started turning on other team members, including her." "The thing about bullies," I replied, "is they always need a target. When one is removed, they find another." After ending the call, I returned to my interview preparation with a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever came next, whether at Horizon, Drake & Associates, or somewhere yet unknown, I would carry forward both the painful lessons and the unexpected strength this experience had given me. My journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, I looked toward the future with genuine hope rather than dread. The reflection in my mirror showed someone changed but unbroken, someone who had discovered that standing up could be painful and frightening, but remaining silent and accepting mistreatment was ultimately more damaging to the soul. 1 year after Richard's hand struck my face, I stood before the county courthouse steps, my attorney Sarah beside me. The civil case had finally reached its conclusion after months of depositions, evidence reviews, and tense negotiations. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The judge had declared his voice matter of fact, as if he hadn't just validated the most difficult year of my life. The judgment was substantial compensation for lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages meant to send a message about workplace violence. Reporters gathered on the courthouse steps, microphones extended toward me as Sarah fielded initial questions about the verdict. When they asked for my statement, I stepped forward, the prepared words momentarily forgotten as I considered the journey that had brought me here. "Today isn't just about financial compensation," I began, finding my voice. "It's about workplace dignity. No one should ever face physical violence, harassment, or retaliation for doing their job well. This judgment acknowledges that truth." I spoke about the importance of bystander intervention, thanking the colleagues who had recorded the incident and come forward as witnesses. I emphasized the need for companies to create cultures where abusive behavior is addressed immediately, not hidden or excused. To anyone experiencing workplace harassment or bullying, document everything, know your rights, and remember that your professional value isn't diminished by someone else's abusive behavior. Your work matters. Your dignity matters. And standing up, while difficult, creates ripples that extend far beyond your individual situation. The impact of the case had indeed created ripples throughout the industry. 3 marketing agencies had announced comprehensive reviews of their harassment policies following media coverage of my situation. A state legislator had introduced a bill strengthening protections for workplace harassment victims, specifically citing cases like mine as motivation. Richard had not fared well in the aftermath. No marketing firm in the city would touch him. His reputation permanently tarnished by both the assault charge and the civil judgment. Last I heard, he had relocated to another state, attempting to rebuild his career far from the scene of his disgrace. The executive position he had so jealously guarded had proven temporary, his power ultimately undermined by his own actions. Premier Advertising had undergone significant changes as well. Following my departure and the negative publicity surrounding the case, the board had replaced several key executives, including Thomas from HR. Their new leadership had implemented mandatory training on harassment prevention, established an independent reporting channel for employee concerns, and created a formal mentorship program designed to support career advancement without bias, favoritism, or exploitation. My own career had taken an unexpected but rewarding turn. After interviewing with several agencies, I had accepted a position with Drake & Associates as a senior marketing strategist. 6 months into the role, I was promoted to team lead, managing a diverse group of talented professionals with the collaborative, respectful approach I had always valued. My leadership style emerged as a direct response to what I had experienced under Richard. Where he had hoarded information, I shared knowledge freely. Where he had taken credit, I highlighted team contributions. Where he had criticized publicly, I provided constructive feedback privately and praise openly. The result was a cohesive, innovative team that consistently exceeded client expectations. One of my first initiatives was establishing clear reporting mechanisms within my department. Every team member knew exactly how to raise concerns, from minor workflow issues to serious ethical problems. We held regular feedback sessions where even the newest junior associates felt comfortable offering suggestions or questioning established approaches. Last month, my team had presented to our largest client prospect, yet a national retail chain seeking to revitalize their brand. The presentation went flawlessly, each team member delivering their section with confidence and expertise. When the client signed the contract the following week, their feedback specifically mentioned our collaborative approach as a deciding factor. We could tell this wasn't just one person's vision being implemented by subordinates, their marketing director commented. Each team member brought unique insights that strengthened the overall strategy. The industry recognition that followed was gratifying, but even more meaningful was the email I received from a junior associate, thanking me for creating an environment where she felt valued and heard. I was ready to leave the industry after my last position, she wrote. Working with you has restored my belief that marketing can be both creative and kind. Beyond my professional rehabilitation, personal healing had been an ongoing process. The financial compensation from the lawsuit had provided security, but the emotional resolution came more gradually. Therapy continued to be an important part of my life, less frequent now, but still valuable for processing triggers and maintaining perspective. My relationship with former Premier colleagues had evolved in unexpected ways. Alicia had joined a competing agency and remained a close friend and industry ally. Several others had reached out after changing jobs themselves, forming a loose network of mutual support and opportunity sharing. Even Jessica had found her way back into my life, albeit in a different capacity. After meeting with Alicia and expressing genuine remorse for her role in Richard's campaign against me, she had asked to meet for coffee. Our conversation was initially awkward, but ultimately healing for both of us. I was so eager to prove myself, she explained, and Richard made it seem like aligning with him was the only path to success. By the time I realized what was happening, I felt trapped in the role of his favorite. She had left Premier shortly after I did, finding a position at a smaller agency where she could rebuild her career on more ethical foundations. We weren't friends exactly, but we had reached an understanding that allowed both of us to move forward without lingering resentment. The most profound change had been in my relationship with my own worth, both professional and personal. The experience of being systematically undermined, physically assaulted, and then fighting back had transformed my understanding of resilience. I no longer measured my value by external validation or professional accomplishments alone. Dating had resumed after a long hiatus, and I approached relationships with new clarity about boundaries and respect. 6 months ago, I had met Michael, a graphic designer who worked for a nonprofit. His genuine interest in my work and respect for my boundaries was refreshing after years of imbalanced relationships shaped by my workaholic tendencies. "You talk about your job differently than anyone I've ever dated," he observed during an early dinner. "You're passionate about it, but it doesn't seem to consume you." He was right. Work remained important, but it had found its proper place in my life, alongside friendships, family relationships, creative pursuits, and simple pleasures that had previously been sacrificed to professional advancement. The path to this equilibrium hadn't been easy. In the months following the assault, certain situations would trigger intense anxiety, male authority figures raising their voices, unexpected movements near my face, even glass-walled conference rooms. Through therapy and practical coping strategies, these triggers gradually lost their power, though they never disappeared entirely. One particularly difficult moment came during a client meeting when a male executive slammed his hand on the table to emphasize a point. The sudden noise and aggressive gesture sent me into a momentary freeze, memories of Richard's rage flashing through my mind. Instead of pushing through or hiding my reaction, I calmly asked for a 5-minute break, stepped outside to use grounding techniques, and returned able to continue professionally. That small moment of self-advocacy, of honoring my needs without shame, represented the deeper healing that had occurred beneath the more visible professional restoration. I had learned that vulnerability acknowledged and addressed became strength, not weakness. The woman who had entered Premier Advertising 5 years ago, eager to prove herself at any cost, would hardly recognize the person I had become. That earlier version of me had defined success, narrowly measuring it in promotions, client acquisitions, and professional recognition. The journey through trauma and recovery had expanded that definition to include personal well-being, ethical alignment, and positive impact on others. As I stood on those courthouse steps concluding my statement to the press, I felt the weight of that transformation. The legal victory mattered, but the internal victory of reclaiming my power and redefining my path mattered more. The slap that was meant to diminish me had instead become the catalyst for growth beyond anything I could have imagined. "The greatest lesson I've learned," I told the reporters as I finished, "is that standing up for yourself isn't just about winning a case or receiving compensation. It's about reclaiming your voice and using it not just for yourself, but for all those who might face similar situations in the future." That evening, celebrating quietly with friends who had supported me throughout the ordeal, I reflected on the strange gratitude I now felt for that painful moment in the glass conference room. Not gratitude for the assault itself, but for the transformation it ultimately triggered, pushing me toward a more authentic life and career than I might otherwise have found. Have you ever experienced or witnessed workplace harassment or bullying? How did you respond, and what would you do differently now? Like this video? If you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a difficult situation, subscribe for more stories about overcoming workplace challenges, and share this with someone who might need encouragement to value their dignity over a toxic job. Remember, sometimes the hardest moments in our professional lives become the doorways to our greatest growth. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage and support on your own journey.